Good evening, friends. I'm excited to be here with you today. Already feel 10 years younger. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Viktor Yevchenko. I have some of my brothers here, Ivan, Sergey, Vadim, who are part of your leadership. A little bit about my family. I'm married, have a beautiful wife. I've been married for 8 years. Her name's Alia. And we have two wonderful kids, Danny and Benjamin, so that is our family. Oh, and we also have another family member, but unfortunately we had to kick him out, and that is our puppy, Jake. And, don't be deceived by the looks. This is uncontrolled alarm clock. Today he woke me up at 2 a.m., then 4 a.m., then 7 a.m. So if any of you are having problems waking up for your school, college, work, just talk to me after sermon, and I'll give you some advice. Now here in church, in Bethany, I'm involved in a Thriving Families. How many of you know what's Thriving? Awesome. So we are the ministry that deals with families and mainly with young families. A lot of our emphasis go to the relationships, to people that are just starting. So using the opportunity, I want to invite all of you, once your status changes, you get engaged or you start dating, just come see us, join our pre-marriage classes. And then once you get married, we have plenty of ways for you to get plugged in, to stay connected, where you can grow together with us, with some of the other godly families in our church. We have a very interesting topic today, and I want to start with a very honest question. How many of you came here today with the goal or desire to ask the girl out? Raise your hand. Or maybe you came here to be asked. I wonder how many of you are lying by not raising your hands. But it seems that it hasn't been that long ago when I was about your age. This was 10, 12 years ago. And I was here in this church. It was a youth conference, and I specifically came to ask the girl out. Now, we previously haven't talked, but that was my decision. And I marked the day that today I got to talk to her. And I already imagined how everything's going to go. I knew where she parked. I know that she's going to walk that way. And I imagined in my mind how everything's going to work, that it's going to be just awesome atmosphere. Once the service is over, I'm going to come up to her. And how in those movies, everything goes in slow motion and our eyes meet and there's this connection and the whole chemistry starts boiling, and then I'll ask her out, get her number. Maybe spend some time in the Bethany Cafe. Actually, it's a really good place to be, so good meeting place. But as you can imagine, nothing ever goes according to the plan. The moment service was over, I tried to execute my plan and I started walking, but I don't know where all these people came from, and they all started heading in the same direction. There were just so many of them that I had to force myself through them to get to her, and then I see her in the distance. And as I'm approaching her, and literally, true story, a couple feet away, there was a group of about 10, 12 people that decided that they needed to cut through us. And by the time all of them went by, she was already gone. That was the biggest disappointment in my life. Now, today she's my wife, and we have a wonderful family. But how many of you know that feeling? When you like somebody and that person isn't receptive to you. Or you plan something out and it doesn't really go the way you're planning. All of a sudden you become depressed, you lose appetite, you can't sleep, and you're just checking your phone and seeing, hey, did I get a message or not? And you lose all your focus, and it seems that life has stopped, and the only feasible solution would be to get the person you envision, the person you like. But you know that this feeling isn't new. If we read the Bible, about 3,000 years ago, in the kingdom of Israel, there was a man named Amnon. Now, he was born in the royal family of King David, and he had a great future. He had a great future because he was the future king. He had a fair amount of prestige amongst the family. And growing up, he was able to do a lot of things that other kids couldn't. His parents, they never asked him for any actions. He had permissiveness essentially to do anything that he wanted to do. His dad never punished him. And he never set any boundaries for him. As we can imagine, he was probably daddy's favorite. And so this young man is grown up, and when he was about 18, he couldn't help it not to notice this beautiful girl that was growing next to him. And Bible says that she was beautiful. Now, if we can kind of turn our imagination, she was probably I don't think the picture describes well enough, but she was probably very beautiful. She had just blue, big eyes. Just close your eyes and start imagining. She had a long, curly hair, and she had a perfect body. You know, you get the point. I don't need to go right around this. And so he was looking at this perfect figure, and he fell in love that he couldn't. The Bible says that he became so obsessed that he became ill. Life has stopped. There's no point living anymore. And he didn't know what to do because she was off limits. She was his half-sister. Now, when you don't know what to do, there's always a friend that does. And the Bible says there was a friend. His name was Absalom. His name was Absalom. And the Bible describes him as he was a very shrewd man. So he instantly came with a plan and said, hey, don't worry. I know how we can lie to your father, and at the same time you can convince your sister, or you can get what you want. So Amnon's pretending to be ill. He's laying in bed, and his father comes to visit him. And when you're sick, of course, any request you ask, they usually fulfill. So he says, well, why don't you ask my sister Tamar to come and just bake some bread for me? So she comes, of course, to help the sick brother. And then we know that he overpowers her and rapes her. Now, to give some credit to Tamar, she was trying to fight him back. And we know that she was saying, don't do this to me. Such a thing shouldn't be done in Israel. But he had so much passion, so much love, but that love didn't include her in it. That love didn't really include her desires and the consequences. And the Hebrew words that best describe the action are overpower, abuse, and then batter her. When he got what he wanted, all of a sudden the love was gone. And Bible says that he immediately hated her intensely. The whole love disappeared. Can you imagine what Tamar must have felt? She was just raped by her brother, and then she's being kicked out of the house. The doors are bolted, and she's left to walk on the streets. Her future is compromised. I think I'm behind on my slides. Her future is compromised, and as she's walking on the streets, she understands that her future is essentially ruined. And she walks and she just weeps loudly. She rips her clothing, and she put ashes on her head and just goes in the full grievance mode. Now, in that society, Tamar will be pronounced as she wouldn't be able to get married again. So her life was essentially screwed up. How did this situation turn from the obsession from such a severe love to the hatred? And what led to this? We know that parents didn't set any boundaries for him. We know that Amnon didn't set any boundaries for himself. He had a bad friends. We know about one friend, but possibly more. And the feeling that he had towards this beautiful girl, he couldn't really figure out whether this was a love, was this a partial love, or was this just some kind of incomprehensive feeling that we would now call lust. But friends, isn't this what happens when we sin? When we sin, let's be honest, how long does it take from passion to turn to the gratification and then revulsion? There's a strong desire following by flickering pleasure, and then there's hatred. And this story is described in 2 Samuel chapter 13. Let's start from verse 1. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. And then after the whole thing happened, verse 15, then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out." There's a Russian proverb that says, from love to hate, there's only one step. And I think Amnon, he truly believed that whatever he had was a true love, and that probably been sufficient to build a marriage or build a relationship. But what do you think? Was that love that he had, was that sufficient to build a strong, healthy relationship? No? And so today we have a very interesting topic, and the way I named it, it's Mark Your Date. Now, before a guy asks a girl out, and before a girl accepts the invitation, before two people mark the date to start dating, there's some basic principle that we must understand. And so dating is a process which consists of 3 phases. And the first one is pre-dating. We'll use this illustration so we can easily understand. And then we have our dating. For some people it's shorter, for some it's going to be longer. Then it's marriage, and then after dating. And for the purpose of today, we will only focus on the first 2, the pre-dating phase and then dating. There's a famous quote that I love, and it says, choosing a life mate is the second most important decision of your life. The danger of incorrect views and actions may lead to the incorrect choices. And so in the pre-dating phase, there are 2 steps that we gotta take. So before we ever start dating, or before we think about dating, before we get into a serious relationship, there are 2 steps that we must take. And the first step is love. Now, a lot of you will say, well, we know what love is. But love in our language is being used in so many different directions. So I'll ask you this. What is love? Is it, baby, don't hurt me? Or is it something else? Or is there more than that? We used the word love. Earlier today, we were worshiping God, and we were raising our hands and said, God, we love you. And I'm sure some of you afterwards look at your friend's nails. Ooh, they're so cute. I love them. It's the same word, but do they mean the same thing? Somebody says, well, I love the fish, especially how it's baked and how my mom does it, or some restaurant. And another person would say, well, you don't love the fish. I love the fish. This is why I got an aquarium and I care for that fish. The same word, different meanings. We know a couple that lived all their life long and they're saying, I love you. It's different than the kindergarten sweethearts are saying, we love you to each other. So we use the same word love, but it has many different meanings and it could be perceived many different ways. And so this why it's very important to understand in our first step of what love really is. What does love consist of? What is a true love? Is it a full love? Is it a partial, or there's no love? And in Greek language and Jewish, they actually use 3 words to describe the functions of love. And the first one is eros, second one philia, and the third one agape. And we know that Bible also talks about the 3 loves that must be present in the relationship. They must be present throughout the whole dating process, and then later they must be present in life. So the first one is eros. Now, how many of you don't know what that is? I think this is the part of love that I need to spend the least amount of time on. This is the romantic side of love. This is the erotic side of love. And God is the one who created man, and He created the sexuality. And I'm not afraid to say this is God's gift. And eros, it simply means that the boy, he likes the girl. He likes how she looks. It's what you see through your eyes. The girl, she likes a guy not because he's a good preacher, not because he prays super loud, or he's a leader, or he has a fancy car. She likes him. It's a sexual attraction. And one thing that we have to point out is in this type of love, in eros, in our bodies, in everyone has it, there's such a hormone, it's called testosterone or estrogen. Now that is, God gave us that hormone, and it's normal to have. If you don't have it, you better see your doctor. But we got to understand that we are at the age where the levels of that testosterone are the highest. And it's a sex drive that we have. So what we got to do with it is be able to control it. The key word is control. And in the book, Can a love be sin? An author is saying, to each young girl, I would like to say, when a young man comes to you with the words, I love you, you should have in mind that this is most likely means the following: I love myself and therefore I need you. I think we see it in an example of Amnon. You know, eros, it's a very important part of love, and it must be present. It's usually the first one, but that is not enough to build a relationship. And with that, I'd like to jump to the second part of our circle, our triangle, which is a philia. Now, philia means friendship. And you know, one of the most important aspects in life in a married couple is that they become best friends. And philia is the feeling when you just enjoy spending time together. It's when you can keep the conversation going. It's when you're interested in one another. You know, it's when you have that chemistry between you. You know, it's that when you're sitting at home and you're laying and you're talking on the phone for hours and you're talking and you know you have that assignment that is due. You know that you have to wake up in the morning and you're still on the phone. Well, you drop the phone. No, you do it. And then you spend another couple hours talking. That is the philia. Now, how many of you know where that monument's at? Anybody? I know Vitaly knows. Anybody else? That is a love monument, not Seattle. It is located where? Philadelphia. And so the question is, why not Seattle? Why not Washington, D.C., but Philadelphia? You know, actually, we were on Bible school trip, Bible school tour just a few weeks ago. And we literally walked through the downtown. There's a circle called the Love Square. And I remember looking at Vitaly, and he was taking so many pictures of this sign from up and down and left and right. I'm sure he had a good reason for it. But you know, this monument has a direct connection to the name of the city, Philadelphia. And it comes from two Greek words which mean philos, which is beloved, and dear. And the second one is adelphos, which is a friend. So it's a brotherhood, friendship, or friendship. And so it's very important that in a relationship, when we start a relationship, we think about it. Let's face it. Most average dates, they're lasting from 1 year to 3, and then people get married. But then they live together for 50, 60 years. So if there's no friendship in the relationship, how are you going to live? Professor of psychology of University of Washington, Dr. John Gottman, he says the following: the determining factor in whether wives will be satisfied with the romance and passion in marriage, and you would think, well, what does that has to do with anything? Is determined by 70% of the quality of couples' friendship. So 70% determines of your friendship, and it's the same for men, by 70%. And so we have our triangle, we have a eros, we have our phileo, and we're missing the bottom one, which is agape. Now, agape, it's best described in the Bible, and it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the 4 verses from 4 to 8. And it talks about, it gives us 15 things of what love does, of what love doesn't do. You know, some of them are: love is kind, thinks no evil, bears all things, believes all things. And then the last one, the 16, is kind of loops them all together and says, love never fails. So that is the agape love. It's the love that never fails. It's the decision, it's the sacrifice, you know, it's the commitment, it's the responsibility. And like Igor mentioned, he was in the wedding this Saturday, and I'm sure many of you have been on the weddings. And usually the wedding ceremonies, they end with the promise of a agape love. I pledge to honor you, cherish you today and every day, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, in joy and sorrow, until the death do we part. I promise, and so on. Now, many people, whether they understand it or not, they say this promise. And the question is, well, why so many marriages are separated? Why so many divorces if this agape is there? Because agape doesn't just present there, you have to work on it. And it's a lot of hard work. You know, agape is the love that sets the boundaries. Agape is the love that put the other person ahead of you. And it's also biblical. It says in Ecclesiastes 4:12. No, I'm not. This clicker's clicking too fast. Okay, I think we're there. Sorry about that. So Ecclesiastes 4:12, it says, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And it's referring to eros, philia, and agape. So it's very important to understand, before we make the step, before we start going to dating, the first step is love. And all 3 must be present. There must be a romance, there must be friendship, and there must be a commitment. Can we all repeat them all together? Let's just say it all together. Romance, friendship, commitment. That was pretty weak. Let's do it one more time. Romance. Awesome. You know, another quick fact that I want to throw in there. When we start dating, or when we just start the relationship, and all 3 of those sides are present, it is natural that some of those angles will be bigger, the other one smaller. But our objective is to work that we make them all symmetrical. So when you start the relationship, usually eros takes the biggest, but throughout dating and throughout the whole process, our goal is to make them all symmetrical. And Professor Robert J. Stenner, he says, the bigger the triangle is, the bigger the love would be. And the more symmetrical the triangle would be, the more balanced the love would be. Do you guys remember we talked about the story of Amnon and Tamar? And he loved her so much that he couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat. He was so obsessed that he became ill. Now, in the light of the 3 loves that we just talked about, what kind of love do you think dominated that relationship? Anybody? Eros, absolutely. Now, we don't have enough facts to say that the philia wasn't present, but we definitely know that agape wasn't there. There was no consideration for the consequences. There was no any boundaries. There was no care for somebody else, for the other person, and there was no commitment. So anytime when eros dominates the relationship, it's essentially predestined for destruction. But if 2 people love each other and they figure that there's in their relationship, in their first step, love is present and all 3 are ready, they're essentially ready to move to the next step right before dating. Now the second step is also very interesting. A lot of people are so afraid of it. Some people never get to dating because they're afraid of this step. Some people step on it and then they fall back. Ooh. Some people step on it and somebody pushes them off. And it's the step of understanding that there's a specific person for me. How do I know that this person is for me? What if I start the relationship and then God intended somebody else for me? That is the second step that some people never get to the dating platform because they're so afraid of making a mistake. And you know, this is a very important question to ask. But if we don't look from the biblical perspective, we can easily get into the dating traps. And I'm going to talk about some of them. So the first dating trap is seeking some kind of supernatural confirmations. And you know, people are doing it by seeking the signs. There's people that are doing it by divination on the Bible. They just take the Bible and they start guessing on it. And there's a third category who are seeking the prophets. Good. You know, I remember a story about a young man who was getting ready to, he was trying to find a girl that he would date. And he said, you know, God, this is such a complicated decision. Well, help me out. I need some kind of sign from you. And so he comes to church and he thinks, well, he knows that all the people come from the back door, but only the choir people, the younger people come from the side. So he says, God, whoever comes from that side door first would be my wife. And then he comes early and just sits there and waits. And you know, before all the choir girls could enter, some grandma just cuts them off and walks in. You know, his prayer changed fast. That God, give me another chance. You know, some of you know stories where people seek prophecies and they come and there's just recent stories where the prophecies destroyed the marriages. So the second trap that people fall into is actually seeking the one and only one. Now, can I ask all the guys to raise your hand? Everyone, all the gentlemen, raise your right hand. Now, put your left hand, put your right hand around your side, and see if you're missing any ribs. I have all of mine, but you guys hear that story about the missing rib? The theory that because Eve was created out of Adam's rib, now you gotta find your missing rib that floats somewhere. And unless you find that missing rib, your life won't be happy. And if you start the relationship with somebody else, but then this is not your rib, it's not gonna be a perfect match. This is just a theory. And today, I remember praying like this. I was like, God, I know there's somebody that you've predestined for me. That specific, essentially, missing rib, and when the time comes right, just send the person my way. If any of you prayed the prayer, you shall pray no more like that. Because that is just a theory. But did you know that this theory actually has its sources in the Greek methodology involving the Greek god Zeus? And that is actually the picture that you guys liked. Yeah. So it comes from the story, and the whole idea that there was just one specific person, my soulmate, it comes from the alleged altercation of the Greek god Zeus and the humans. Now, the theory goes that humans, they had 4 arms, 4 legs, 1 head, and 2 faces. And so the Greek god, he feared that humans, he was threatened by them, so he split them in half. And then ever since, people are just chasing to find their second half so they could be happy together. Now, how crazy is that? How many of you would ever think that this is anything close to the reality? This is just a myth. Yet Christians adapted the similar story of the same myth, and they call it the missing rib. Bible never tells us to find that special one. In fact, Bible teaches us how to live with the person we choose. This is why Apostle Paul never says that we must find that special person designated for you, but he teaches us to choose somebody who lives by the biblical principles, the principles of forgiveness, love, acceptance, and in other words, this is called a believer, the person who is born again. Now, we know that not everyone going to church is a believer, right? I remember a famous saying by Billy Sunday, who used to be a famous baseball player, and then he became evangelist. And he said, going to church doesn't make you a Christian. Same thing as going into a garage doesn't make you a car. So we're not talking about people in this building. We're talking about people who are born again believers. And so, what is the proper way of finding the person? And it's very clear. The only criteria for us to select somebody is the person must be a believer. That's it. So if we take the circle and we put, all believers in it, if we put all believers in there, you can select anybody and have a happy family or happy relationship. And so before we get to the dating plank, there are 2 prerequisites. And the first one is to understand and know what love is. And it consists of 3 loves that we've talked about: eros, philia, agape. The second one is you date the person who is a believer, the person who is born again. And if those 2 prerequisites are present, you're ready to move to your dating blanket. Now, for some of us, this could be a short way. For somebody, it's going to be longer. But one thing that I want to mention, anytime that we start dating, we need to have in mind, we need to see the end result, the destination, and that is to get married. I'll give you a moment to think about that. Anytime that we start a relationship, we must have a goal that this is a serious, and my intentions to date somebody is because I want to get married. Now, throughout the process as we walk, of course we can fall off. We can also step off if something's wrong. If we figure out that there's definitely something wrong, we can end the relationship. That's normal. But whenever we start the relationship, we need to see the goal that we will marry this person. And I want to talk about some of the things that are not the goals or improper goals for dating. And one of those would be just to date without any serious goals. Another one is just to try something new. Another improper goal would be just because it's popular, everyone's doing it, all my friends are dating. Improper goal would be to date to fulfill the lust and all the fleshly desires. So what are the proper goals of dating? The proper goals are to know better yourself and the person who's going to be your spouse. Dating is to make the right choices. Dating is to learn the art of conversation, and it's to learn the self-control. You know, as I've mentioned, whenever you're on this path, and if something doesn't work out, you can easily step off, you can end the relationship. I remember a quote by one person who said, you know, the best divorce is before you get married. So the option is there, but whenever we start it, we must be serious about it. And there's another quote that I like to read, and it says, the absence of preparation is the most common cause of family crisis. The foundation for a good family is laid before marriage. In other words, it's throughout the whole process. When we're single, when we're stepping to the first step, pre-dating, when we're dating. This is the preparation for a happy marriage. And you know, for this phase, we talked about the pre-dating. Now, in order for us to figure out the whole dating process and be as relevant as possible, I do realize that I'm already from a different generation. I'm actually going to need your help. So we will all participate in this, and the question that we're going to try to answer is, what kind of dating should we have? Or what kind of dating should we suggest somebody to have? And for this, I'd like to invite a couple volunteers, actually people that I'm going to point, Zach, Pastor Zach, and if you can have Alex, also Sarita, if you guys can come on stage. And so this is going to be the part where we'll have a couple scenarios and we'll try to figure out what is the best solution or best suggestion that we can give them. Now, the way it's going to work is we'll have some questions on the screen, and first, after reading the scenario, you guys will be able to vote. So you'll be able to answer the questions if you can get all your phones out. And then once you vote, we'll be able to hear what our experts have to say. And again, as they're coming, just to conclude, in the relationship, in the whole process, the full love must be present, not partial. It is important that eros is present, but it's also important that philia is there. The romance must be there, but also the friendship must be there. And the biggest one that connects them together is the commitment, which is agape. All right, so if you guys can scan the QR code, okay, it's on the screens. I'm going to read a scenario, and then we'll have a question pop out on the screen, and you guys will be able to answer. And you know, some of these questions, this could be you sitting here who are in similar situation. And the first one's going to be, it comes from a girl who says, my boyfriend is a very creative person, and he consistently looking for new ways to impress me. Who says it's a bad thing? It's a good thing. So the first date we spent at Bethany Cafe. Told you guys. And then it got real old, so we started dating at Temple Coffee. Then he offered to go to the lake to get some tan, and it was just an unforgettable experience, him putting lotion on my shoulders. Another good experience was going to the outdoor theater, just sitting in the car and watching such a romantic movie. Now, when COVID ends, he promised me to take me to Hollywood and in San Diego for a few nights. My dad, however, isn't against our relationship, but he says that we should be limiting our dates to youth services and only come to our house. However, my boyfriend hates coming to our house, and he only comes to drop me off. So this is the letter that we got, and we need your help to try to answer. So you guys are able to select on your phones. Go ahead. So the code is 16662. Thank you, Serge. We'll have 30 seconds, so within the 30 seconds, we'll stop. And now, Serge in studio, press start, please. So whatever the question is, where should we date? And the options are home, lake, overnight trips, or church and youth. You can select only one, whatever you think best fits. Does it work? Sergey, press start. Okay, good. We give another 10 seconds. So the options are home, lake, overnight trips, church, youth, and all church activities. So we have 68% that selected the church would be the best option. Somebody thinks overnight trips. We have 10% on the lakes and 10% at home. Now, if we go to the next question, it's right the opposite, and it states, where shouldn't we meet? Now, this one you'll have to type, and you get a chance to only select one answer. So you can type, where shouldn't they meet? Let's help this couple out. Pastor Zach wants the records of all the phones. Does it work? Sergio, you got to press start again. You know what? It probably doesn't work, so what you got to do is just send a text message to Zach of where you think, and he'll be able to figure out from there. Oh, there you go. It works. Let's see how creative we could be. So this is where they shouldn't date, where they shouldn't be going. Not too fast. We can't read them. We're going to keep those on the screen, and with that, I'd like to go to Alex and start with him. Alex, what do you think about the whole situation, scenario, and what advice can you give people? 1 minute. No. Can we turn on the microphones, please?
Good? Yeah. Okay. So you said, what was the scenario?
It's the first scenario that we read, and it's where is it appropriate for a couple to date? They want to go everywhere, but dad wants to limit them to go to just church or be at home, and but they want to go to overnight trips, they want to go to lake, they want to go to movies, they want to spend time in the car, and all of it. What do you think?
So what I believe personally is that a relationship, or let's say a process to marriage, consists of stages. Now, my personal opinion is that there are a few stages that you have to go through. The first stage is you get to know a person, where you go out and you actually spend time together on a date. You go whether to a coffee shop or you go to a restaurant. And then once you get to know a person, because essentially your goal is to pass across the plank and get married. So first of all, you want to get to know a person. But not least important is getting to know the family and their friends as well. And I believe that's where the two other stages come in, where a group setting and a visit to her house, let's say if you take a guy's perspective, would be appropriate, where you go out and you have that dinner with the parents. Essentially, they're very important in her life, very important in your life, and it's important that they know you as well as you get to know them. And I think it's an amazing time to do that when you're dating, is because a lot of similarities. What I've been hearing, I've read a lot of marriage books and dating books when I was in Bible school, thanks to Paul Yevchenko. And one of the things that they're saying is that there are a lot of similarities between the daughter that you're dating and the parents. So it's a good thing to see an extended, view of her. And I really enjoyed it. Plus, another thing is visiting the parents' house is a lot cheaper than going out on a date. That's what actually my wife's dad said many times, and I said, that's actually a really cool idea. It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, if you want to save some money, just go to the parents' house. But you guys notice what he said? The Bible school, and I heard Vitaly say, oh yeah. So if you want to start a good relationship, maybe Bible school is good for you.
But I think the stages, they mark everything. If you want to get to know a person, obviously you want to spend time together with a person that you want to essentially get married. And a date where you guys can be alone, but not alone in public. I'm talking about being in public, but being alone. So one of the things that I guess my wife and I really wanted when we were dating, we did keep our relationship as low as possible for us to avoid any sort of inputs. We wanted to get to know each other. So we looked for a place away from Russians, but within the public. So we stayed within the public, and we wanted to really get to know each other, talk to each other. Even though we were in Bible school together, we decided that Bible school is going to be a Bible school where we focus on God, and then relationship would happen after, which I really thank God for. But a place, let's say for a stage where you're just getting to know her a little bit, a place together for spending time getting a cup of coffee in public, but away from Russians.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Can we put a countdown on the screens, please? And then we'll go to Sarita. What do you think?
Personally, I completely agree with Alex when it comes to dating and where you should date. The big thing that I agree with is community. You want to have a community around you. That's something that I was very intentional about. So when you go out with people or your significant other, grab some other people. And when it comes to family, go out to either his or her side family. And if you're going out on dates, grab siblings. That is a big thing that I thought helped a lot. Get to know the family, and you'll see how they treat their siblings and how they interact with them, and that'll give you a lot of insight as to how personality traits and characteristics that maybe you don't see if you spend one-on-one time just with them. So that gives you a lot of inside information, and I would say stay in a community so that they could keep you accountable. And if you go somewhere where you want to go, as Alex said, one-on-one on a date, keep it in a public place where there's people surrounding you.
Wonderful. You know, and I like somebody answered, подальше от греха. Pastor Zach, what do you think?
Well, in the 19th century, it was a little bit different. No, just kidding. Actually, it was, my heart is pumping just like on the first date. That was a very good point. You said it. If you person really loves you, he wouldn't be afraid to meet the parents. That's what I did. You know, pretty much in the first, I wouldn't say the first date, but when I was serious about her, we had a couple trips with the youth on the Auburn River, you know, it was maybe like about 100 of us. But after that, it was maybe a few months later, and I just pick up her after the, choir, and I said, you know what, I'm really serious about you. I had a big flowers, it was a little bit different than now. So I took her home, and I talked to her parents, and she was still in high school at that time. But I wasn't afraid to meet her parents because I have a serious relationship in my head, in my mind. So I decided so.
Thank you. Thank you. As you guys heard, you know, family, community, staying together, and definitely stay away from Zoopark. And with that, we want to go to the second one, which says how often. And, you know, some people take it very short, and it's just a rapid race, and others just take it for years. And we have two similar scenarios here that I'd like to read. And it says, we've been dating for a year and a half. I still love my girlfriend. Oh, we're talking about how often do we date. We've been dating for a year and a half. I still love my girlfriend as I did before, but because of such a busy schedule, 18 units in college, part-time work, and full-time ministry, I barely find any time to spend with her. I barely find any time to even take lunch. Now, my girlfriend accuses me of not loving her because of my busy schedule. And we have another scenario of a little different content, and it says, I'm a senior in high school, my girlfriend is a freshman. We can't live a day without seeing each other. It's already been 6 months, and the frequency of our dates have quadrupled. We see each other in school, in the morning, during lunch, after school, and we spend a lot of evenings together. Now, my friends are jealous, and they're saying that I'm blind and I'm confused, and I should stop seeing her as often. What do you guys think? How often is a normal dating pattern? How often is a normal process for people to date? And the answers are a few times a day, once a day, once a week, twice a week, once a month, whenever we feel like. I can see who's voting, who's not voting. So we're almost at tight. Twice a week or whenever, they're almost the same. I've got 3 seconds on the clock. And with that, I'd like to start with Pastor Zach. Pastor Zach, what would you recommend? How often should a couple be seeing each other when they're in their relationship?
Just come to church on Thursday and Wednesday and Friday.
Amen. All right, we'll go with that to Alex. Is that it?
No, I think that would be proper to see in the church. I mean, I would say twice a week. That's if you plan just like Sarita was saying, with the family, you know, because eventually you will get married family, not just her. Family comes with her, whether you like it or not. The parents and the brothers and sisters, the bigger the family, they're easier to love, right? But just to go, I mean, once a week, twice a week. I mean, twice a week is hard if you had a full-time job or a full-time school. Even once a week with a group of people, that will be, I think, will be good amount of time to spend. Can be
Wonderful.
all day.
Thank you, Pastor Sarita. What do you think?
I agree with Pastor Zach. One of the big things that I know for me in my relationship was seeing each other at church. So that was Thursday services and Sunday services. Those were the 2 times, and then any meetings in between. But that was the biggest thing for us was, I would say, once to twice a week. And you want to keep it a reasonable amount, because I saw a lot of people said whenever they feel like. I don't know what that means. As to like whenever you desire, whenever you just miss them. I mean, you want to keep the relationship going. You want to be devoting time, because I know for girls, you like to spend time. You need to feel loved. Guys might not understand that as much. But so for the guys, every once in a while, let your girl know you love her. And then whenever you feel like you need to tell her in person, then do it in person.
And Alex, when you guys were dating, we're not talking about the Thursday sermons. How many times a week have you guys, or a month, have you seen each other?
Well, there were, again, there were stages. Believe it or not, about a month, semester before we got married, our wedding was June 2nd, and starting from January, we were seeing each other maximum once a week on a Saturday. And, you know, in a sense, I do believe that every stage has its own way. Sometimes it has to be a little bit slower. Sometimes you can have opportunity to see each other, but like Sarita said, it has to be reasonable. And I think God put the borders for us before we got married, because we, you know, she had her schooling and I had my schooling, and they would not match up. So when she was in school, I was at home. When I was at school, she was at home. And the only time we were able to see each other half a year before we got married was once a week. And I tell you, when the desire is to have a beautiful marriage, a blessed marriage where parents are blessing, you're setting yourself up for a blessed life together. That's enough, because you know each other enough in order to talk about things. You sit together, you have your lunch together, you spend your time, and you love a person. But that's enough for you to, like Sarita said, remind her that you love her, that you're building things together, you're building your future family together. And it doesn't have to be too lovey-dovey. Once you get married, you can. You know, that's an amazing time. But I found it to be interesting that God aligned it that way, and that was more than enough for you to stay lovey-dovey enough for you to get married, I guess.
So one time on the youth service, and then one more time besides it. How many would you agree that twice a week is probably a good amount of time that you would see your loved one? Yeah? Most of you? Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, guys. And then, so the next question is, how long? We're not talking about the frequency of dates. We're talking about the length of the relationships. And it says, somebody wrote, our love journey has been changing with time. During the first 2 years, we were dating and it was all romance. Then it switched to logic, then to calculation. And now we've been dating for 9 years. Some of my friends already have kids, but my boyfriend doesn't even want to talk about marriage. What should I do? And then another scenario where it says, we met last month on the home group. Our love has been growing ever since. I have about a year and a half left in college until I become civil engineer. My girlfriend, she's working part-time at the beauty salon and still has 4 years of college. Now her parents are pushing us to get married this summer in 8 months. How long should it be till we can get married? And the next question on the screens. Let's give them some advice. These are real people seeking your help. You know, while you guys are voting, we talked about Jonadab, right? The friend of Amnon. And it was this very interesting characteristics. The Bible calls him a shrewd man. In other words, he's a crafty man. Now we can think, hey, this is such a good characteristics. I would love to have a friend like this. But who else in the Bible is called with that description? How many of you know? Devil. Who? Devil. Yeah, the serpent. He was the craftiest of all the animals. So be careful who your friends are and the advices they give you and what they push you to. All right, so we have, how long should we date before getting married? And majority, 82% are saying from 1 to 3 years. Sarita, what do you think?
Good job, guys. I would agree with that completely. If you're going past 3+ years, I would take a time to sit down with your significant other and talk about what is the purpose of your guys' dating relationship. Where are you guys trying to go? Is marriage in the picture? And if marriage isn't in the picture and maybe your significant other's like, you know what, I don't think I'm ready to get married, it might be something that you guys have to kind of think over and see, hey, maybe we need to move on. Maybe you need some more time. Maybe I need some more time. But again, it all depends on circumstances. I know sometimes people are in school, and that might have to take a little bit longer because people want to finish school. So in that scenario, that second scenario, I would say to sit down with your significant other, talk about how long you plan to date, take into consideration finances, work, and school, and then talk to your parents and kind of maybe get their opinion as well.
Wonderful, really good. Yeah, and I agree with that. The length will depend on your circumstances, but it also will depend on the frequency, how often will you meet. So let's say if you have 3 more years of college, you shouldn't be seeing each other twice or 3 times a week. That's too often. Limited to once a 2 weeks. But if you're getting married in 6 months, then you can increase the frequency. So these things work proportionally. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I agree, and again, everything depends on the circumstances. Let's say, Jacob had to wait 7 years, but those are the circumstances. Now, I think, what I think is that if there's an opportunity to get married, right, and a person deliberately pushes it out, then I think the love that's being talked about is a little bit questionable. But if there is a circumstance, again, this is life, and not one relationship is similar to each other. They might have similarities, but they're not exactly the same. And if there are circumstances where you do have to wait, at the end of the day, it's worth it. If you're waiting, and there is just circumstance that you do need to wait, it's worth it. But if a person has, or a couple has, opportunity to get married, they have everything in the sense, there's green lights in every corner, but they're just try to pushing that out, and they don't have that kind of desire. Well, let's just stick around. Let's see how it goes. I think that love is questionable, honestly.
Absolutely. And again, once you stepped on the dating blanket, you're already here. You must see the marriage. And if your significant others doesn't want to talk about marriage, and it has been 2-3 years, yeah, like Sarita said, I would raise the red flag and start questioning, because for a girl to date for 8 years and then separate, she lost the whole 8 years of her life. Now, another thing, as we broke the myth that there's no significant other, there is no that specific person just for you. So if you know what love is and it's there, it's present, it might not be all that symmetrical, but it's there, and you got to work on making it all symmetrical, and you love the person's godly, what's stopping you from going? Just go. Find somebody, start dating, get married. Pastor Zach, what do you think?
Well, just like Alex was saying, Jacob, reason why it was like 1 day for him, because he loved her. He waited 7 years. And I even thought about, he got a double portion. He got 2 wives. No, just kidding. Because he waited 7 years. But I think it's, no, we only can have 1 wife and 1 husband. I'm trying to be correct. There was in the Old Testament. There was punishment. No, just kidding. But yes, Serge. Don't get excited. I'm just kidding.
Should we go to the next question, or what?
I think it's based on circumstances. If she's still in school, I would say you can wait, but it has to be the reasonable time. We did like 1.5 years, maybe a little bit more, but that's perfect. I mean, if you wait too long and you have no destination, where are you going, and you have no choice, and you're not sure if you want to marry her or not, just go step back, and just sooner the better. But if you're really serious, and the second step and the third step, it's a perfect illustration, Victor. Thank you. So just keep going, and just I would say 2 years, 1.5 years. But for some people, it even can be 1 year. If you're the person, and you already got your education, you got your bachelor degree or master degree, and she got her master degree or good job or good career, I think 6 months, 1 year can be also perfect. Don't wait when it's getting too old.
Yeah, like what Pastor Zach tried to say is if you're on a dating blanket and if you don't see the end result, just jump off. So the next fourth category is interesting, and it's called boundaries. And we have an interesting scenario, and it goes, the following question I started hearing from my boyfriend very often. Why do we need to have all physical boundaries between us? In a year, we'll be one body anyways. We'll get married. Didn't you read the Bible? And then additionally, he says, because you keep resisting to kiss me, it puts me in a question if you even love me. Now, he thinks that everything's allowed with the exception of sex before marriage. I disagree, but at the same time, I really love him, don't want to lose him. What should I do? It's an interesting situation, and we have one more. Bible, because I have personal relationship with God, I'm able to determine by myself what's allowed and what's not. Nobody has the right to set any boundaries in my relationship except God Himself. If we'll be overstepping God's will, He will warn us and tell us to come back. I don't need any boundaries. I'm interested to see, and this is the one where you will actually, what's not allowed, you guys are able to type it, but again, you have only one choice and be very diligent in what you write. Let's help these two couples out. We can track your phone numbers down. I'm just kidding. We got 2 kissing that's not allowed. How many disagree? Would you stand up? No? Holding hands? Come talk to me after. The list can keep going. We would start with Alex. Alex, you're a youth leader, you're a deacon, you're married now. Why don't you give us your word of wisdom, just a little advice that we can take, we can help these couples and us as well.
Well, you just come to a pastor and say, I want to get married to her, and that's it. You just get married there. You know, back in the day, that's how they've done. No, but on a serious note, God has already set the borders. He already set the structure of a relationship, how a relationship goes. There's a reason why it says when there's going to be a time when 2 will become 1. And until you standing in, you know, during your wedding day and you become that 1, you're completely 2 separate people. You're separate people, and the thing is that you're not even promised for each other. So whatever you think you cross in the borders or eventually we're going to be together, it's not true. Once you're married, then you're 1, then you are promised to be together for the rest of your life, and that's your life. But I think, you know, there's a lot of these things are truly a belief, regardless of the borders that we are set. Guys tend to push them all the time. That's the nature of guys, is just to prove themselves manly. And I think especially for girls, once you set the border and you stick to it, if a guy is loving and truly loves, he will remain at those borders. He's not going to cross them, and he's going to wait. And whatever. You know, even in our relationship, we had these borders that my wife set. And I thank her so much for that, because she's made it so much easier for me. And she said, hey, let's do this. Let's not date anytime after 10 p.m. Let's not do that. I want to be home at 10 p.m. And let's not talk even on the phone past 11. And you know, that really helped me as a guy. I loved her. I loved the Lord. And you know, when you're a healthy person, and you're attracted to the person, there's the most loving thing that other person can do is help you in that relationship. And setting those borders and helping each other stick to those borders will eventually bring you into a place of just blessing. And not only are you going to stand and receive a blessing from your parents, from God, you yourself are going to be blessing each other for how you led your life in the dating process. I believe truly setting the borders is a sign of freedom, that you can stand in those borders. But if you're trying to push them, it means that you're not really free of something in your life. So I believe truly, I mean, I can't really say don't hold hands. You know, kissing, I think it's just something that would lead you. You make it harder for yourself to stand in purity. So therefore, if even holding hands will lead you into having your blood boil, avoid it, stay away from it.
You know, I remember my story when I started dating, but it wasn't dating. It was just the first time I asked her, hey, let's go. We went to San Francisco. But I remember that talk in the car. And then later, you have no idea how many times I regretted because, of course, I wanted to push the borders. But we sat and we talked, hey, if we're going to date, we want it to be a godly relationship. We want to keep ourselves pure for the wedding. And then later on, you know, as we were dating, I was like, man, why did I say it? I don't know where it came from. But, you know, for us, when you're not sure whether you're dating, you're not dating, it's so fresh, it might be an awkward conversation, but that is conversation to be had. Figure out, you know, you're building your future, you're building your blessing, you're building your relationships. And so let's go to Sarita.
Yeah, just like Alex said, and even Victor, that conversation might be awkward at first, especially when you don't know where the relationship is going, but have it. Girls, don't wait for the guy to start the conversation. You start the conversation. You initiate it, because more often than not, it's easier for us girls to do that than sometimes for the guys. As Alex said, they kind of want to push the borders. So I would say that. And in regards to loving, you don't only love physically. You can show love by writing a letter, by sending a sweet text message, by giving a gift, doing acts of service. So those physical boundaries don't keep you from loving somebody or showing your love to them. You can do it many other ways. So.
You know, and this is a topic for a seminar, but there's a 10-step process from nothing to sex. And later, if we do some kind of seminar, you can examine if you're in a relationship. It's a very fast-going process. Pastor Zach.
Well, I remember somebody was asking the pastor, Pastor, how close I can get to the sin, not to sin? So he gave him the answer, how close you can get to the fire and not get burned. Just think about it. If you're playing with the fire and how close you can get to the fire to not get burned, not get hurt. And I remember one person was sharing with me, he was in circumstances in somebody else's house. It was other way around. That she was pushing him, and so what he did, it was wicked lady. He grabbed his hand, he just touched the stove and burned his hand and just run away from the house. She said, you crazy. Like he said, I guess I am. That's the only way to get out, just like Joseph did. So just run away. So that's, each circumstance is different, but don't come too close to the fire. And it's such a blessing for those, I mean, even for the pastors when you officiate a wedding, you know, that's to me, when you're praying for somebody and they're totally pure or they're halfway pure or they prepare themselves, and a lot of them, they do fasting and prayer for that day to get full blessing because they will spend the rest of their life together and just receive the more blessings.
Thank you. And you know, I think in the story of Amnon and Tamar, if the stove was available, she probably would have done the same thing. But you know, that probably would have brought better results into their life. And at that point, they had no boundaries. And you know, if in Proverbs 6:27, it says, can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? I'd like to leave it with that if we can all stand.